Welcome, listeners and viewers. My name is Joseph from Zuma. Our team works in the world of recruitment for data analytics and engineering, supporting tech businesses and professionals in the Berlin region. Our podcast today, Data for Good, we are entirely dedicated to the world of data analytics and engineering. That's about how we use data, how we get into data as a career, and the impact that data is having on our everyday lives. Today, I am joined by Nikola Milosevic, Data Science Manager at Bayer Pharmaceuticals in Berlin. Hello and welcome, Nikola. How are you today?
Hello, I'm good. Thanks for the invite.
Hey, you're very, very welcome. Nikola, could you start by telling us, given your background in data research, could you tell us how did you first get into the wonderful world of data and data research?
So it was a while ago, like around 2010, 2012. Basically, I was studying back then at the School of Electrical Engineering or Faculty of Electrical Engineering at the University of Belgrade. But we didn't have at the time much of the subjects that is like data science related. It was kind of like a new field that I basically discovered by Coursera appearing and starting around that time. And the first two courses were machine learning by Andrew Nick and natural language processing by Juravsky and Manning. And I took like those two courses during the time and kind of like got really like fascinated by the whole field. And then like wanted to like do more about that. So at that point of time, I started like searching for my master thesis, and like idea that came kind of naturally to me was that I want to do some of the stuff that I learned on the course, but like for Serbian language. And it is like there is like quite some difference both in grammar and in like language as such. So there are like some challenges, but still like machine learning can be applied and a lot can be transferred. So like I found the supervisor at the time, but then like I finished that. I made a stemmer and classifier for like sentiment analysis for Serbian. And then I was kind of like looking for a job, which was not really easy to find in the field. So like I started working as a like software developer, and then like I joined some kind of like competitions, hackathons, and so on. And one of which was like Startup Weekend that was organized by Royal Family in Serbia. And we had this like idea to kind of like have a business application of this like sentiment analysis. So like do some kind of like check of like brands sentiment on the internet and like on Twitter, Facebook, and basically social media, and like who how speaks about like certain brands. So like we win that Startup Weekend, but still I had a bit of hard time explaining to my boss to like invest into the idea and so on. So at some point, like I realized that I need to do a PhD, and there was like opportunity that like I went to Manchester to do like PhD with AstraZeneca. So that was kind of like my entry into like biomedical data science and biomedical natural language processing. And from there it kind of like went on that like afterwards I like joined Bayer, and like I did some application as well, like in finance, and some kind of like marketing applications and so on. So yeah, like it is kind of like history of 10 years, but it's like especially the start was kind of difficult, I would say.
It sounds like a lot of hard work, study, effort, attending lots of, the weekend and various courses.
Well, of course, like there was, I guess you have to do it, especially if your main university or main field of study is not exactly what you want to do. Like for me, it was kind of like still computer science, so like it gave me a lot of foundation. But we didn't have like really data science subjects there, and the ones that we had were taught by professors that I wanted to avoid because they were like not really great at that. And I rather took like professors from Stanford and so on that were like on Coursera. So it's really, I think, as well important who teaches you what, and especially nowadays with like Coursera, Udemy, Udacity, and all these like online platform, you have a lot of choice to choose the best ones. And yeah, like that was a lot of benefit that like I had the opportunity to pick the real good ones, and then as well down the Manchester I had like as well in person quite a lot of interaction with like some of the best people in the field, especially like Manchester is quite good in like ontology and like data management and stuff like that. Like they basically like the group from there basically invented like all and this kind of like ontology language, ontology web language and stuff like that. So like I quite had like chance to like interact with those people, and that was like really productive. And as well like during the whole kind of like time, it is really useful to take the courses on the side to kind of like update your knowledge and yeah, like keep track of everything. And obviously like once you're in research, then as well there are papers and like scientific conferences where as well you have the opportunity to both learn and interact with people.
Very interesting. I'm getting a strong impression that academia and academic research is important to you, and clearly you've done several different courses, which it makes for a great point of comparison. We can go into that, I'm sure, another time. Today, given that background that you told us about machine learning, engineering, NLP, and data research, it would be great to go into those topics today in the context of business versus academia, and even the health and medical sciences domain. Fantastic. So if we could get into those, could we start at the top? Could you give us, or could you tell us the differences between academic and business research in data science?
Okay, so like the clear difference is a little bit harder to make because there is a lot of as well like collaboration between academia and businesses, but I guess the major difference is that in a business, there is a little bit of more kind of like focus on the product and focus on how the research is going to be used. And you always need to kind of like establish this, that like how it's going to impact the product, how it's going to impact the pipeline, how it's going to kind of like increase the productivity and so on. Like quite often you would have to do similar things as well like in academia, like when you're writing a research proposal, even though like if you're doing it as a student or as a postdoc, you don't see that part. Like that part is kind of like hidden, as professors usually would write those proposals, but still it kind of like exists. But yeah, like once the project ends, quite often it's kind of like paper is published and there is like not really this kind of like follow up into the product and into the something that is like really used afterwards. While yeah, like in business there's like huge incentives on actually making it into the product. And then there is as well like how the funds are distributed. So on this kind of like management level, there is like huge difference on as well. Like if somebody wants to like focus the company in a certain direction, there will be as well like the funding for it. While in academia, it's like distributed by the government bodies, and there is like different strategies and so on, and like different institutions are competing for the same money. So it's a little bit different and more complex, even though as kind of like junior, for example, like a data scientist quite often would be working on kind of like similar things, like it would be kind of like solving the certain problem with the use of machine learning and like trying to come up with like new algorithm and so on. But like once you go up into the management, there are like differences start being more and more visible.
Interesting. You talked about funding there, particularly in the business domain. Could you tell us some more about that?
Yeah, so I mean, in business domain, like you would get funding from your like top management, right? Most of the time, and it's kind of like that would steer as well direction of the research, like where they see going company or where they see kind of like that the research that will be done will have the most impact on the product and the sales and on kind of like revenue of the company, because companies would always want to like satisfy shareholders, make a bigger revenue, make more money. So that's kind of like the point of the company, while like in academia it's a little bit different. And that is kind of like usually main source of the funding, especially for full-time employees. But still, especially some companies still have the opportunity to apply for public funding and like get involved into PhD projects and into some like postdocs and stuff like that. Like we will hopefully start some like PhD projects soon. So like we did apply for some funding in this way, but it is relatively rare for PhD projects. But like for postdocs, for like people with already like finished degrees, we had already for a longer time kind of like participated in some European union projects and stuff like that with like other academic institutions.
It seems like you straddle both worlds, the data science research for business and the data science research for academia.
Yeah, I mean, like in the area where I guess I sit, but I think it's as well like for a lot of especially larger corporation, they would have like quite a lot of connections with academia, and therefore the environment would be quite kind of like sitting on the two chairs, like both kind of like doing like a lot of collaboration with academia, trying to tap into the like most recent academic research, and as well like trying to translate that into the business domain and into kind of like products and like something that can in future like generate revenue. Also, like for example, in my area we don't directly generate any kind of like revenue, but it can translate into like finding a new target, new drug, and so on, which like then it's like validated, clinical trials are done, and then like 10 years down the line we have a product. But yeah, like if you look at it as kind of like, yeah, like we don't do anything that like immediately generates revenue, but yeah, like we want to be sitting on kind of like very, very close to academia in order to both like feed into the academia our needs, and as well kind of like sitting on top of this like top-notch research and getting as soon as possible access of the best methods that smart people that are working around the world in academia can produce.
An area of research is, of course, NLP, and that is also a passion of yours.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, could you give a quick overview as to what NLP is, and also the direction of NLP research in your field of work in the pharmaceutical world?
So NLP, basically, if people don't know, stands for natural language processing. And that's the area of AI. So like you could have like a number of areas like computer vision, natural language processing, robotics. We can all kind of like wrap them in this like huge bundle of AI. And yeah, like that is like one of these areas of natural language processing that is focused on language and on like understanding either textual language or as well like speaking language in some regards, but like mostly we are looking at the text. And quite often if we are talking about speech, usually it's something that it's some process where you like transform speech into text and then you analyze text. But yeah, like basically it's kind of like trying to teach the machine to understand language. And there are like many as well like sub areas. So you can classify language, you can find entities in them. Stuff like search engines are part of like natural language processing. So, and that is probably one of the most commonly used or most like what people know. There is, and then there is as well like various like voice
To focus in
like
on that, search engines that the layman would know, being Google search engine, for example.
Yeah, for example. And as well like some kind of like assistants like Siri or like a Google Assistant or this like
Alexa.
Stuff like that. They all use like natural language processing. They try to like make some structure of the data on that they have on the internet, and then they based on your questions and understanding of your question try to respond you with the most relevant information.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to like direction, it is like there was like huge progress, I think, in last, well, I don't know, like 20-30 years since the field really started, especially in biomedical domain. It's like early 90s, I would say, that like really first NLP for biomedicine started. And the major problem, I think, always was like lack of labeled data. So in order to like do supervised learning, you need labeled data. And we have been coming up with like more and more algorithms that need less and less data. And as well like transformers that are currently used almost everywhere for like natural language processing, machine learning based ways. They like reduced quite a lot amount of data by using unsupervised learning and transferring a bit between like unsupervised and supervised learning. But still there is this like problem that, yeah, like you still need some good amount of data. So like one direction is to build like more of this like zero shot or few shot learning algorithms that actually don't need many examples, that need like 5-6 examples and can like generalize based on that.
Zero shot and view shot.
A few shot, like few shots.
Few shots.
And the other kind of like way the research is going at the moment is that there are like more and more bigger and bigger language models, which at some point probably will need to stop because we will reach our limits of how big the language model can be. Like obviously this big language model need less data to like learn something from it and can as well like serve this purpose of like zero shot or few shot learning algorithms. But on the other hand, they're like sometimes too big to be applicable. Like you need 5 servers to host single language models, which tends to be quite expensive at some point. So I think we will need at some point to have like more research invested into optimizing of this model and making the model smaller, and like these learners learn based on like fewer parameters, so they don't need this like huge space in memory to like optimize and like basically make more efficient architectures. And then like since 2018-19 there is like huge kind of like push into the graph learning, and as well this kind of like transfer between like unsupervised and supervised learning, how we can actually utilize as much as possible the wealth of data, like textual data we have. Like we have it on the internet, like we can crawl it, there's a lot of data, but they're not labeled. And can we somehow infer the relationship between words and entities in text and the meaning based on like purely text, and like how to actually add semantics without showing too much to the machine? Because that's kind of like, I think, the most difficult part. Like we are lacking the data, and either we will have like huge push to create more labeled data based on which we can learn, but that is like really like use case by use case, and really it goes slow. Or we can somehow like generalize and utilize unlabeled data, and then have like very few labeled information that we can generalize better on.
Would you be able to put this in some context? So in your specific field of pharmaceutical or medical science?
Yeah, so like we are quite often looking for biomedical concepts in literature. For example, like when somebody publishes a paper, we want to find from that paper what relationship they had like between, for example, genes and disease and like other entities. And quite often people come up with new requests. So like, I don't know, like gene disease relationships are quite common, quite old requests. So maybe we even have a data for like enough labeled data to label diseases and genes. But what tends to be difficult is when somebody new comes and says, okay, we now want to do more precision medicine, because now everybody is like in medicine moving towards more kind of like patient-oriented treatments. And for like, in order to make like more like utilize more precision medicine, we need for each patient to know as well like how biomarkers are kind of like reacting to different treatments. So we need to like figure out from text biomarkers. Now, like biomarkers could be quite complex because they could be both measurements, they could be both as well genes. And there is like not really, or at least I haven't seen the data set of labeled biomarkers out there. So basically we don't have this data set. Now, if we want to quickly like develop some kind of like recognizer that can like make relationship between biomarkers and diseases, we would have to have some kind of like zero shot or few shot learning algorithm where somebody can feed it like 5 or 10 examples, and the algorithm would be able to recognize future biomarkers. But yeah, like at the moment we don't have it. So like usually we would go to some company, the like outsource labeling that would cost us tens of thousands of euros, because we need like a couple of thousands of them. And yeah, like that is kind of like hurdle that we are facing, that yeah, like when somebody comes with a new either entity or relationship type that we need to kind of like recognize, or some kind of like new requests for like classifying in some documents into a new class. We just like don't have a data, and therefore we a little bit like struggle either for like to create the data, or to kind of like find the algorithm that can provide us like sufficient solution with as little data points as we can generate.
I think I see. Like with other areas of data science and data analyses, the solutions that we come up with can only be as good as the data that we use to build these solutions. Now, with advances in medicine, we need to give those advances time to see the effect on the market or patients to be able to build new algorithms. Would that be accurate? General but accurate?
I mean, yes, like so there are like, I guess, two aspects. Like one is that like data science is relatively new, especially in companies for biomedical research. So we still don't have many like medicines that came up from data science. And as well, the whole process of like drug development, like, okay, bioinformatics have been used for a while, and they came up with some like targets and some of the genes, and as well like maybe compounds with like cheminformatics coming into the play. But all these, it's not enough that like you would come up algorithmically to something. You need to actually validate it first into like in tissues, then in mice, then in clinical trials in human, and so on. And that takes quite a lot of time. So quite often you would see the like drug on the market like 5 to 10 years after you actually discovered the drug.
I won't go into the pandemic and the antiviruses that we came up with, because that's a bit of an outlier.
No.
But I am keen to know, given your strong academic background in research and of course your passion for this area, would you be able to tell me about a data science project that you've worked on that's helped the field of medicine?
I mean, I can't really tell you that there is anything that I worked on that already had some visible impact. But yeah, like we are working on like knowledge graph and different kind of like information retrieval, like search engines and so on, to make our scientists easier to find like genes that should be targeted for certain diseases, and as well like compounds, chemicals, these like biomarkers that they can follow during the clinical trials and so on. So like that much I can tell you, I guess. But I can't go into like much more details. And as well, like those projects have been going on for just like year or two, and there is like no medicine that actually been, and it's as well like to a degree hard to follow that like what actually was triggered by the data science, because like there is a lot of these like steps that actually happened in the lab when they like tweak a little bit compounds and tweak a little bit some things and so on. And it takes and yeah, like majority of work, like majority of time of like new medicine development takes place in the lab still.
So watch this space.
Excuse me, can you repeat?
Watch this space.
Yeah, like watch this space. I think in next few years we will have like more and more things coming out from data science, and the efficiency, like this kind of like clinical processes will get shorter because of data science and because of the efficiency it provides.
Okay. At this point in the podcast, we ask our guests to share some advice, particularly about data science in general or about a career in data science. Given, and I know I keep mentioning it, your strong background in research, machine learning, and NLP, what advice would you give to our Berlin-based or German data community?
I mean, I don't think there is any kind of like location specific advice that I can give, but like if we talk
I'm
about
thinking more of our viewership that they're
yeah,
largely based in Germany, but yeah,
yeah.
hopefully it's global advice.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I guess because the data science is still like relatively new field and quite fast developing, what is important is like to keep on learning and to follow the bigger conferences and kind of like and as well there are like kind of like big players in both like industry and academia in a certain area that is interesting for you. So I mean, like, you know, like there is like a Google research fair, like Facebook research and so on, like stuff they come up with is quite interesting to like follow. And as well there are like some academic institutions that are as well like quite interesting to follow. And obviously there are these like NIPS and a couple of like other conferences that like ACL and so on in the natural language processing that quite often produce quite interesting research. And what is really cool about data science community is that most of the research tends to be open, like either open source or the papers are at least kind of like published. So there is like quite easy access to the knowledge. Even though, yeah, like you still need to have some mathematical backgrounds to understand it and so on. So it's not always easy to understand, but yeah, like at least it's accessible. And then as well, like try to find a niche that you're passionate about, because it is really kind of like tough field. There's like more and more data scientists around the corner, and yeah, like if you are not really passionate, you will not be so interested into learning more, and at some point may become like less and less relevant. So therefore it's kind of like this passion, I think, is quite important, that like people who are really passionate into data science be into data science. And if you're passionate about something else, yeah, like it's better to go where you're passionate about, because that is where you will be actually good in, like no matter how much the field is, I don't know, like inflated with money and so on. Like currently it's kind of like hit to be in the data science. So like I think maybe even some people wrongly move to the data science because everybody wants to be a data scientist and everybody's hiring data scientists and so on. But after a few years, they figure out that it is not really their field. So I think this is kind of like passion and learning are kind of like continuous learning is kind of like two really big big things. And kind of like, yeah, like, and as well, like networking is quite good. Like networking is always useful to exchange the ideas with the colleagues who are as well like passionate, who may have as well some different views than like yourself, or may know about something that you don't, may point you into certain directions. So as well, kind of like try to in that space have a good network. So I guess these three things, like network, be passionate, and continuously learn, would be my three pieces of advice.
I got those three, but I got more. So I got networking with your colleague with a view to sharing ideas, learning at the beginning, but also continuous learning, research avidly, and take advantage of lots of open source research. Follow your passion, and you gave very strong reasoning for that. And you also mentioned you recommended academic institutes. Are there any specifics that you might recommend?
I mean, there is Allen Institute for AI. There is, I mean, Stanford University comes up quite often with good stuff. Like I can't come too much from the top of my mind, but as well, there are like in various fields, I guess there are like groups in various universities. So like, I don't know if you are into ontologies and ontology management, there's obviously Manchester, who is like a good like ACL and Imperial College are as well quite good. Munich universities as well, like for a certain field. Linz has this like Institute for Machine Learning with like few people. Then like Toronto has Mila, and then like in New York is like LeCun, and like it is quite wealthy. I think you can't really go through all the university and mention all the people that are relevant in the field.
However, you might be able to. So junior data scientists or people wanting to get into data, they might not know where to look. And you've given a pretty comprehensive list there of institutes to follow. So I think people will take heed as to your advice. So yeah, thank you so much. And that's all we've got. Sorry, what was that, Nikola?
Yeah, like if that helps, like you're welcome. But yeah, like as I said, there is like much broader list that I think like this is just a start for people.
And a great start it is. People will see data as a minefield, and you've given us some bullet points, some stuff to really work on there. So thank you for that. And also, it's all we've got time for today. And I know you've got another meeting coming up shortly. So again, a big thanks for coming on the podcast, sharing your knowledge and wisdom about NLP and machine learning, and also how data is affecting the bioscience world. So yeah, a big thank you to you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for the invite. Again.
Hey, very, very welcome. And if anyone else watching or listening has any questions or comments, feel free to post them to myself at Zuma, or also Nikola at Biopharmaceuticals. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you all next time. So thanks very much. Bye-bye now.